There are some supplements that you should just throw in the trash. They are worthless, especially when it comes down to body composition. Then there are some supplements that fly under the radar. It's like they're not even aggressively making fat loss claims, but they're actually some of the ones that you may want to consider. So what I'm going to address today are 5 supplements that you should consider that are not worthless for fat loss. Does this mean you take all of them? No, this is informational. These are ones that you probably could look into and consider taking that aren't going to be a complete and total waste of your time and money. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first one is one that's kind of interesting because it's constantly up for debate, and this is carnitine. Now I want to dive into this one a little bit because carnitine is very, very, very critical in our bodies. Okay, 98% of the carnitine that is in our bodies is stored in our muscles. We endogenously produce carnitine, right? So carnitine's job is to take fat that has been mobilized, that's in the bloodstream, and transport it into the mitochondria where it can get burned. Seems like it's pretty darn important, right? Yeah, it is. Okay. The big argument that comes up all the time is, well, if we naturally produce carnitine, do we really need to take it in a supplement form? And begs the question once again, maybe it's only important if you're deficient in carnitine. But I'll get to it in a second. Being deficient in carnitine may be a lot more common than you think. So let's break down a study really quick, because I like to look at big meta-analysis to justify things. This study was published in the journal Obesity Reviews. It took a look at 9 randomized controlled trials, okay, with over 900 participants. So it looked at a lot of data. And the cool thing about this meta-analysis is it took a look at a wide range of people. Obese people, lean people, people with bipolar, diabetic people, all kinds of different walks of life. And when they backed out all the data and looked at this, said, wow, it does look like carnitine supplementation may lead to a pretty solid fat loss. In fact, on average, it was like 1.33 kilograms of fat loss with the carnitine group in all but one study. So pretty interesting, right? So then what's the deal here? What's the actual mechanism? What's happening? I think it's important to know. Okay, when a fatty acid is in our bloodstream, it needs to get into the mitochondria in order to get burned. So first it goes into the cell, okay? And when it goes into the cell, it turns into what is called fatty acyl coenzyme A, okay? And this fatty acyl coenzyme A then combines with carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1. And that makes fatty acyl carnitine as well as coenzyme A. Okay, so this carnitine palmitoyl transferase, CPT1, that came in and acted upon the fatty acid, then turns it into something that can get into the mitochondria. Once it's inside the mitochondria, then it gets acted upon by what's called carnitine palmitoyl transferase 2, which turns it back into a usable form of fuel. So long story short, carnitine comes in, breaks down the fat, changes it a little bit so that it can get into the mitochondria. Without carnitine, the fatty acid cannot get into the mitochondria to get burned. It is the rate limiting step. So if we are deficient in carnitine, it really can aggressively slow down fat loss. So then it comes back to the question, but if we're not deficient in it, we don't have a problem. Correct. But carnitine is created from lysine and created from methionine, okay? So any deficiency in those aminos from proteins, plant-based proteins, whatever, can cause this issue. Also, vitamin C, iron issues can cause the same problem. But one of the most important things to note is if you are exercising at 75% of your VO2 max, doing that workout for a while can deplete 80% of your carnitine stores, and it happens faster than you may think. So what I'm suggesting here is if you're working out intensely, you might want to consider adding carnitine in. It might not be a bad thing, and it's ruthlessly inexpensive. Okay, the next one is green tea extract. Now, there's a lot of evidence on green tea extract, and it's actually one that I typically like to play around with too. You have the combination of caffeine, which you know is a good fat burner, and then you have catechins. Okay, so let's take a look at a study first. So there's a study that was published in the journal Obesity Reviews again. It took a look at 6 studies, so it's another meta-analysis. Okay, and it took a look at a mix of caffeine and catechin, okay, and in this case probably looking at EGCG. They found there was a 4.7% increase in energy expenditure and a 16% increase in fatty acid utilization. Okay, so an increase in energy that's being expended plus an increase in the majority of fuel that's being used as, like fat that's being used as fuel. I'm pretty sold right then and there, but that's just one study. Let's take a look at how this could potentially be working in the body. So EGCG, the main catechin in green tea, may actually enhance thermogenesis within our brown fat. So brown fat is the fat that's on our body that dissipates calories as heat. It's not like unsightly white fat, it's actually metabolically active. So if we increase the thermogenesis of it, we're increasing the heat of the already hotter brown fat, allowing us to burn more calories just as heat. instead of having to exercise for them, if that makes sense. There's also an increase in PGC1A, helping mitochondrial biogenesis, an increase in AMPK. AMPK is the energy sensor within our body, and if we increase that AMPK, it tells the body, hey, we need to start liberating fats because there's low energy in the body. So an increase in AMPK means your body starts pulling from its stores better, which is exactly what we want in the way of fat loss. And then, of course, the caffeine that's in green tea is going to be good because it's a nervous system stimulant that's going to encourage more brown adipose tissue to ultimately be more thermogenic and more active. This next one is never really marketed as a fat loss supplement. And I am personally a fan of it because it's what I use, right? I play around with these. I am a fan of adding probiotics into the mix. Now, interestingly enough, probiotics themselves don't burn fat. Okay, but what could play a role in better energy substrate utilization, better glucose utilization, better fat utilization are our short chain fatty acids. Okay, when we break down food and fibers, a diverse microbiome, meaning having good plethora of diverse amounts of bacteria, they break down that plant matter, those polysaccharides, and that turns into short-chain fatty acids. Okay, short-chain fatty acids are the byproduct of bacteria feeding on food. Okay, so short-chain fatty acids are a signaling device, and that's where the evidence gets pretty interesting. So short-chain fatty acids as a signaling device can improve fatty acid utilization. So fatty acid oxidation in the muscle, in the liver, in the brown adipose tissue, but additionally short-chain fatty acids have been demonstrated to drive up AMPK. The same thing I just mentioned, drives up that energy sensor, so the body becomes a little bit more conditioned to start tapping into stored fuels. And then short-chain fatty acids, when we have an abundance of them, can contribute to better glucose utilization by activating hormone PYY and also glucagon-like peptide 1. So essentially, you're not necessarily burning fat better, but having a diverse microbiome could play a big role in helping you use fuels better, which I think in some ways you could extrapolate that it could help you burn some fat. If you want to know the probiotic that I personally recommend, they're also a sponsor on this channel. It is called Seed, and it is a daily symbiotic, so it means it has a prebiotic and a probiotic. If you look at it, it's pretty cool. It has like a capsule inside of a capsule, sort of a two-stage system. So anyway, they are a big sponsor on this channel. They did sponsor this video. Not saying that they're magically going to burn fat, but it's what I utilize, and I find the science very interesting when you look at the big picture. So there is a link down below that can save you 15% off if you do want to try it. It's pretty awesome. It might be worth checking out if you're interested in the gut health and the microbiome. Plus, they're funding a lot of awesome microbiome research, which makes them pretty darn cool. So that link is down below in the description. Okay, this next one is CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. Now CLA, again, comes under fire a lot. Why? Well, because its fat loss potential isn't huge, but it's consistent when you look at the research. The other issue we face is CLA in supplement form is not exactly the most absorbable. So although I'm considering it one of my 5 supplements that's not worthless, you are better off getting conjugated linoleic acid from like beef or from cottage cheese or from goat cheese or from higher fat dairy, simply because it's going to be a more bioavailable form. But here's the cool stuff. There was a meta-analysis that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Took a look at 18 studies. At the time of publication, these were the only studies that were out there. So it looked at all 18 studies that were even available on CLA. It found that when you took a look at CLA supplementation versus control, there was a consistent 0.09 kilogram per week weight loss over generally about a 12-week period. It doesn't sound like much, but it's consistent and it's reliable. So when you look at all these 18 studies, you see, wow, generally, over the course of 12 weeks, you can expect almost 1/10 of a kilogram weight loss. Again, nothing to write home about, but nice to know that it's fairly consistent. Now, how is this happening? What's happening? Well, in terms of the mechanistic actions, we have to look in mice. So there's a study published in the journal Nutrition that took a look at mice, and it found that what could be happening with CLA is it could be increasing the amount of carnitine palmitoyl transferase in the brown adipose tissue. If you're not lost yet, well, you're about to be, right? No, let me make it really simple. Remember the whole carnitine thing I talked about? Remember how we need carnitine to get fat into the mitochondria? Well, this essentially is putting more carnitine into the brown adipose tissue. So already we are getting more mitochondrial activity and more potential fat burning in the brown adipose tissue. Okay, that's the brown fat that generates heat. Now this is in mice, but since we don't necessarily know the mechanism in humans, we could probably elucidate that it has something to do with that, but I can't make any serious claims on that. Anyhow, let's move into the next one, yohimbine. Yohimbine is an interesting one because I think it's overmarketed and overhyped. I don't think that it's a magical fat loss supplement, but when you look at the mechanism and how it works, it's pretty fascinating. But first, let's look at some data. The European Journal of Clinical Investigation demonstrated that when Yohimbine was taken pre-exercise, there was almost 2x the amount of fatty acids circulating in the bloodstream post-workout. So it liberated twice as much fat. It really stimulated lipolysis. And the way that it does this is it's an alpha-2 antagonist, which means that it binds to what is called the alpha-2 or A2 adrenergic receptor. Okay, when it does that, it is basically making it so that more fats are able to get liberated out of a fat cell. It binds to this on a fat cell. Liberating fats is great, especially when you're doing it through some wraparound mechanism like blocking a receptor. But if you are not exercising with Yohimbine, it will not do anything. You can block that alpha-2 adrenergic receptor, and what's going to happen is fatty acids are going to be liberated, but if you're not actually going out and oxidizing the fats that have been liberated, they're just going to circulate right back, and lipoprotein lipase is going to put them right back into the adipocyte, right back into the fat cell. So what that means is if you take Yohimbine, work out. If you take Yohimbine, do cardio. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.